Now, yesterday's meeting of European anti-Islamist groups in Aarhus, organised by the English Defence League, was judged a damp squib in the papers this morning. But the thousands who staged a counter-demonstration think we should not underestimate them. They say Europe needs to learn from the horrendous killing spree by Norwegian right-winger Anders Behring Breivik, whose trial begins in 2 weeks. Is Britain too complacent about the far right? Tommy Robinson, the leader of the EDL, is here. And on a previous rally, this was at Tower Hamlets, you said, I just want to see exactly where you're coming from here. You said, every single Muslim watching this, on 7/7, you got away with killing and maiming British citizens. You got away with it. You had better understand that we have built a network from one end of this country to the other end, and we will not tolerate it. And the Islamic community will feel the full force of the English Defence League if we see any of our citizens killed, maimed or hurt on British soil again.
Yep. Basically, that we will highlight it, as we've done from day one, peacefully protesting, bring it to the media attention and put pressure on the Islamic community to deal with the Islamists within
respect, that doesn't sound peaceful, that sounds very threatening.
Well, it wasn't. It was peaceful. It is peaceful. And it's not a threat, it's a promise. We will continue to do what we're doing. The Islamic community have got Islamist organisations in every one of them. They're not dealing with them. We now have more Islamic extremists in Britain than we've ever had. And it's spreading like a wildfire.
What would you mean by full force?
By full force, taken to the streets in as many numbers as we can.
What do you mean by every single Muslim watching this?
I mean every single Muslim, it is your duty to deal with the extremists within your community. Stop brushing it under the carpet, pretending it's not there.
Now, people say you're just a bunch of thugs. You came out the football thug culture. When you headbutted a fellow EDL member, Alan McKee, what was all that about?
Well, about was it was Combat 18. I stood up on stage.
Right.
We had a breaking point in our movement where we had neo-Nazis trying to attach themselves to what we stand for. So I took the opportunity to stand on stage, call them out, name them. When I got off stage, I was confronted by people wearing Combat 18 T-shirts. At which point I headbutted him, because he was seat-hiling and shouting abuse. And then, when I got back to the coach, I was confronted by another 30 Nazis. I get many death threats on a weekly basis by Nazis. We've done more to confront Nazism and Islamism.
So are you an anti-Nazi movement?
I am, yeah, we are. Yeah. And Islamism and Nazism are opposite sides of the same coin. They're identical. They're both fascist ideologies. But Nazism's been defeated, Islamism hasn't.
Well, it's interesting, because Nick Griffin from the BNP described you and your organisation as good-hearted morons.
Nick Griffin, yeah, that's coming from Nick Griffin, yeah?
Well, he likes what you do. He says, and I'll go on with a quote, he said it in February 2011, they're trying to do something, he says of you, and the good thing is they've politicised a whole generation of youngsters.
Well, when you drown in, you clutch at straws. We looked around. Before I joined the BNP, I didn't know non-white people couldn't join. I was a member for 12 months on the elite list. If you check the elite list, I didn't renew my membership in 2005. And from him...
You thought the BNP was a multiracial organisation?
Well, I didn't know that non-white people couldn't join it. I didn't know Nick Griffin used to be leader of National Front. I didn't know he was a Nazi. And for him saying we're morons, I watched him on Question Time. So
good-hearted morons?
Yeah, well, I watched him on Question Time, so we'll know who the good-hearted moron is.
Well, answer, how dangerous do you believe the EDL are?
I think Stephen or Tommy or whatever and his organisation are extremely dangerous. I think they peddle hate, they peddle misconceptions, they peddle myths at a time when we've seen spikes in Islamophobia, race hate. We see attacks across the United Kingdom.
Have you been threatened?
I've been threatened many times on Twitter. We have live cases. I've been threatened with violence against myself. But this isn't about me. This is about a broader issue, which is, as a society, we have your organisation, Tommy, Stephen, which is peddling hate, which is hurting, alienating. You are denigrating a whole community. Over and over again, it's been made very, very clear by the leadership within your organisation. This is about all Muslims. This is about Islam, not Islamism, and I'm sure you couldn't even define Islamism.
I've grown up in Luton. Some of the best people I've met through growing up are Muslim. Some of my mates are Muslim. You had Butch Vassell on this show last week. I was out with his son on Thursday night, okay? I don't hate all Muslims. Muslims are the first victims of Islam, extremist Islam. That's what's happening. I don't hate Muslims at all. And I've said that from day one. When it comes to peddling hate, you just said you've been threatened on Twitter. OK, well, I've had an armed guard for my family for a week. I've had threats to decapitate my children's head. I've been in hospital with bruising on the brain. I've had 8 stitches in my lip. I get confronted and attacked on a weekly basis. So I don't need anyone to tell me about being threatened and where it comes to from being threatened.
No answer.
Do you not think for a second that you are part of an organisation, and your organisation, you were in Denmark yesterday,
yes,
and you are bedfellows with people who are saying that we want to outlaw the Quran, we want to outlaw the hijab, we want to deport Muslims from Europe, we want to exclude them, we want to pay them to have governments send them out of Europe. You are trying to become now a soft face which is appeasing hatred against Muslims and Islamophobia.
Let me ask you something. The people that share, to a greater or lesser extent, some of the concerns that Tommy attempts to articulate, do they not count? Yeah.
I think the concerns are important, and I think we have a major problem in this country, which is there has been no proper debate about what is the nature of Islam. Islam, as far as my understanding is concerned, and almost every Muslim I've met, Islam is inclusive, it supports women's rights, it gave women's...
Wahhabi sects of Islam? Wahhabism?
I have no idea what that...
Extremist sects, Saudi-funded sects. They're peaceful.
This is the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
This is the United Kingdom. Yeah. We're talking about Muslims and Islam in the United Kingdom.
We
are inclusive. Hold on a second. We are inclusive. We're tolerant and supportive and encouraging of other faiths. In Islam, it says La ikraha fi din. That means there's no compulsion in religion. So Islam is not about oppression. It's actually about providing freedom for people and freedom from fear. Fear, the kind of fear that your organisation peddles.
Fear that Islam peddles towards us in many ways. And you're saying this. There'll be thousands of people, millions of people sitting at home from working class backgrounds who live in towns like Luton Town who don't see it integrating, who don't see it as being peaceful, who see hostility. My children...
Sorry, who don't see what as integrating?
Islam is not integrating society.
So this is an Islamic problem, not an Islamist problem.
No,
so you're not talking... you are not talking about political extremism. You are talking about Muslims generally, and you've said it now again.
I'm talking about Islam. I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about Islam is failing to integrate. If you look across Europe...
But there are millions... Can I just say, there are millions of people who perfectly well integrate. You think all Muslims, do you not, are like Anjem Choudhury and that mob?
How can you just say that? I've just told you.
It's the same as somebody assuming that all white people are like you.
How can you just tell me? How can you just tell me that I think all Muslims are like Anjem Choudhury when I've just said some of the best people through growing up I've met a Muslim. Some of my best mates through growing up were Muslim. Yeah, Islam. Islam is in a 7th century ideology. It's not just me that thinks it's failing. Every single... The fastest...
Well, hang on, let him finish. Let him finish.
The fastest growing political parties in every single country in Europe are anti-Islamist political parties. Whether you like it or not, it's happening. People are fed up with what's going on. Islam needs to evolve, it needs to modernise, and it's not... You can't call me a racist or fascist for picking out problems within the Islamic ideology.
Matt Goodwin, how significant are the EDL? Are they, in a way, changing the discourse in this country?
Well, they are a significant movement, and they're representing concerns and grievances that are in society. I think, on the other hand, probably lots of people who are watching the show, which organisations like the English Defence League tend to have a lot of slippage in the way that they talk about Islam. So an organisation that started talking about militant Islamism now openly talks about Muslims in general. So let's just...
talk about Islam in general.
Well, OK, but let's just be absolutely clear.
We have to be very precise in our terminology, because it's such a sensitive issue.
Let's be absolutely clear. When we look at the survey evidence and we look at all of the research that's been done, the vast majority of Muslims in this country do not endorse terrorism or suicide bombing. The vast majority of Muslims in this country feel strongly attached to their country and their neighbourhood. Okay, the vast majority of Muslims in this country do not endorse things like honour killings that you're organising. This is okay. So here's the problem.
Under Sharia law, Muslim women are treated second-rate citizens. Here's the problem. 50% less of a man. They have their...
I'm not a second-rate citizen.
No, but you'll get 50% less than that of a man in a Sharia law court. Well, that's not on in British. Women have fought for decades for equal rights in Britain. Muslim women...
I'll tell you what I find really interesting about...
lies, Tommy. You're telling lies.
Wait a minute, Shaista.
What I find really interesting about your organisation is I was looking at your website yesterday, and you're trying to say that you're a human rights organisation. I mean, I find that quite farcical. Basically, your organisation does peddle hate, you peddle misinformation. Last month, in March, 2 Asian men were beaten to a pulp by 4 men from Yorkshire who claim they sympathise with the EDL. They have actually gone to prison.
Where's the evidence?
Well, this is what they said. It actually was discussed in court. They've gone to prison. Okay. Now, 2 weeks ago in Salford, not that far from here, a black woman was walking in broad daylight, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She's pushing her child in a pram. A man racially abused her, used sexual language and threw acid at her.
Well,
now, racism is very
this?
much a reality of people's lives.
But Shaista, the other side of this is that, I suppose the question some people ask is, do the Muslim community need to do more to separate themselves from their extremist wings, Muslim communities? From their extremist wings, there are young men who want to kill their fellow Britons. There are those poppy burners. Now, what do you think of all those people?
I think they're extremists. I think they're an absolute disgrace, just like I think you're an extremist.
Okay. Well,
simple as that.
You talk about human rights. The European Court of Human Rights done an in-depth study in 2004, and they found that Sharia law is incompatible with Western freedoms and democracies due to their views on homosexuals, their views on women, and their views on infidels. That's all the non-Muslims over here.
But if you're a defender of liberal values, as you seem to be portraying yourself, why in a recent Channel 4 documentary did you throw items at the police and abuse an Asian security guard about Norway, and you were impersonating Anders Breivik?
No, you see...
Why do your members wear is this true, toy pig masks and carry bacon? It's liberal values. It's hardly Shirley Williams,
I'm glad you pointed that out. When I had my hood up and I had goggles on, this is what we're up against as an organisation. I said ribbit because I looked like a frog, because I had goggles on and I was drunk. I didn't say Breivik. They put a subtitle as Breivik. I didn't say Breivik, I said ribbit. So and taken out of context, a lot of those things, if you know what the story behind what had happened, it's not the way it will look.
What are these pig masks all about?
I don't know, I don't wear a pig mask. I don't wear a pig mask.
The point is more important than this, and I'll tell you why, Stephen, because firstly, within society, and one thing you're not recognising, you're worried about the Islamisation of this country.
Not just I'm worried.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Look, you're worried about the Islamisation of this country. You're worried about the Islamisation of Europe because of fear. Fear that doesn't need to exist. If you understood the Islamic contribution to this society, arts, science, maths, history, music, literature, hold on a second, the Renaissance.
Look at all these Islamic countries where Christians are being persecuted and massacred.
You cannot judge
on 44 other countries.
You cannot judge, Stephen, you cannot judge a religion by the misguided actions of a few individuals.
It's not a few individuals, it's 44 countries. It's 44 countries, and we're here talking about the far right. Can someone define far right to me, please?
The old politics.
Can you define far right?
Matt's one of the experts on that very thing.
Right,
there are two key things that far-right groups share. Okay, firstly, they reject or they undermine what representative liberal democracy is all about. Now, a liberal representative democracy accepts that a plurality of views is legitimate. We should support those views. We should allow those views. Okay, and I think what many people would feel is that your organisation and the way in which you campaign is automatically discounting the views of Muslims and the rights of Muslims to hold those views. But secondly, what far-right groups share, I mean, I'm sure you would say you're not the same organisation as, say, I don't know, the American Nazi Party, right? Because there's a lot of variation within those parties. Hold on. But what they also share, ultimately, is a rejection of human equality. And I would guess that many people who are watching the show would feel that your organisation isn't talking about Muslims.
Okay, well, you'd say
I'd bring Jamie and Abra in a second.
You'd say far right. I say we've got a Sikh division, a Jewish division, a Hindu division, and excuse me, sorry, and Matthew's an expert on the far right, yeah. Matthew, you're from Kettering, 98% Christian. You was brought up in Kettering.
No, I wasn't.
Where was you brought up?
Chiswell Green.
Chiswell Green. Well, what's the population of Muslims there? It's non-existent.
I live in Manchester. I'm more than familiar with
what I'm saying is, where you've been brought up, there's been no Muslims, there's been no immigration. Where I've been brought up, when your children go to a school where other children at that school's fathers are teaching them hatred due to their Islamic extremist views, then you can be an expert. Because all these experts which are doing all these studies and reading all these books, they're out of touch with reality.
Jamie Bartlett, are you out of touch? Are too many politicians out of touch with what he perceives as his reality, Tommy Robinson?
I think so. I mean, I think clearly one of the reasons groups like the English Defence League and all across Europe, various forms of far-right parties are growing, is partly a feeling that especially left-wing parties that should have been representing the working class no longer really understand what it's like to live actually in a multicultural society. I mean, Tommy can say, you know, I live in Luton, I know what it's actually like, you're from Westminster, you've actually got no idea. But the question here is about whether we're complacent. You know, for all the bluster that Tommy and the EDL can present each week, and they get lots of media coverage, there's not actually many of them. Most of them are online on Facebook and on forums and all the rest of it. They can't clearly get more than 400 or 500 people out in the streets. Look at the BNP in the UK. Polls, what, 1%, 2%? And look what happens across the rest of Europe. In France, the Front National are polling at 20%.
This is really key, isn't it? There's no, Matt, there never really has been. Mosley in the 30s had a sort of brief shining moment, if you want to call it that, but nothing much beyond that. There's been no tradition of electoral success in this country for far-right parties, hasn't
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. I mean, a lot of that has to do with the system that we have. I mean, we are just as concerned as our European neighbours about the core far-right issues.